Thank you both for being here. Thank you for the film. Thank you for your performances, Diane. Just at the outset, I just want to say what an immense pleasure it is to be speaking with you this evening, so thank you. Okay, let's talk about the Shrouds.
Go.
This film is concerned with very unusual bonds shared between people. In a way, at least for me, this film is sort of following 3 different marriage stories. And along the way, we get to see how marriage is sort of rendered meaningless for some of these characters. I'm thinking like how Soo Kim is having an affair before her husband has died, how Terry and Maury are divorced and like evidently bitter and wounded by that experience. But then we have something much deeper and I think more difficult to articulate with Karsh and Becca. I mean, I would describe them as soulmates. I don't know if that's how you would, but I think the deeper we go into this film, I mean, it's evidently this is an intense, unusual love, but the deeper we go into the film, it becomes a lot more slippery. So I guess I wanted to start by just asking you, how you were thinking about these ideas about marriage, about souls and like soulmates when you first started writing this film, and how did these ideas evolve as you were building these characters?
Oh, well, it evolves out of my living experience of it, I mean, this is not an autobiography, but it was induced by my experience of love and my marriage that was 43 years, and the loss of my wife, and so on. So this is where it all started, from personal, my responses to all of those things. But then once you, as I said many times, once you start to write a screenplay, it becomes fiction, and the characters become fictional characters. And as a writer, as a director, you want that. You want the characters to start complaining to you and pushing you around and saying they don't want to do this, but they want to do that instead. And they surprise you by the things that they say and the things that they do. And at that point, you've created living characters, and you're no longer really documenting your own life, which would be another thing. I mean, this is really a rom-com. I hope you realize. That.
I do think this is a really beautiful love story. I feel like it struck me in a way that no other film of yours has had an effect on me. So I'm curious, like Diane, this is your first collaboration with David, but I'd imagine you were familiar with his work. So like, what was your reaction to the script?
Yeah, when I first received the script, I didn't know that this was a personal, or based on personal memories of David. So I was quite taken aback of how there were lots of very emotional scenes for me. Obviously, the scenes between Becca and Karsh are emotional, and they really touched me profoundly. And I think when David and I met, and we got talking, and what inspired the film. I am a huge fan of his work, and I think I've seen most of his films. But this one, for me, is, it feels very special, not only because I'm part of it, but also because I feel David a lot in this.
I want to ask you more about, I want to ask you about each of your roles, but I want to start with Becca, because she is, I think, like the most intense and complex, because for many reasons, but especially because she's a character who's perceived through other people in this film. I mean, through Karsh's sort of grief dreams, and also in relation to Terry, who's kind of like this distorted echo of her. So I'm wondering how you differentiated and sort of internalized this character when we know so little about her.
Yeah, in a way, they were the most straightforward scenes to play, because she is coming in and out of his dream, of his memory. So she is this impossible, beautiful woman who appears and who is going through this terrible illness. But their memories and their moments together are so beautiful. I loved her so much. I felt their connection. I felt her need to be touched, to be loved, to be physically with her husband, to not let go of earth, the flesh, of being here. So I loved those scenes. They were very difficult to play in a way because of the nudity and all the amputations and the illness but they were beautiful. I loved her. I loved her so much. She haunts me to this day in my dreams. And then Terry is. I had a lot of fun with Terry because she's out there and little cuckoo, and I loved being a dog groomer. So I don't know. There was they were really fun. And Honey was just a total different exercise of being in those weird suits with all the dots and humping nobody. But the green screen.
Right. So this was a motion for Honey. This was a motion capture performance.
Yes.
So you were in your own shroud, in a way.
Oh yeah, I do my own dancing.
Yeah. David, did you always envision that one actor would play Becca, Terry, and Honey?
No, actually, when I really thought of them, of course, as very separate people when I was writing it. But it was, I think it was my casting director, who Deirdre Bowen, who I've worked with for many years, who said, and of course you're going to want Diane to play both characters. And I said, oh, actually, I never thought of that. And in fact, I hadn't thought of it, because I don't think of them as twins, I think identical twins. I think of them as sisters who are very close in age and look a lot alike, but not as not twins. And of course, I don't deal with them in the movie as twins. There's no discussion of twinness and identity or anything like that. So the answer is, for some reason, even though it seemed pretty obvious after I thought about it, and especially after I met Diane, that it made sense to have one actor play both roles, and then Honey as well, obviously.
I do want to get back to Honey too, but could you share your first sort of interaction with each other? What made Diane seem so right for all three of these roles?
Well, as I've said many times, casting is really a black art. It's a huge part of directing is casting, and it's a part of directing that is rarely mentioned, I think, in film schools and so on when you're learning to be a director. But a huge amount of directing happens in pre-production in general, and then in casting in particular. So, but it's not something that's easy to describe, because it's your own particular sensibility, your own understanding of what you want from an actor, how you work with them. And I had seen Diane in several movies, in particular one called In the Fade, which was a Fatih Akin film. And I really thought, no, I think she would really be terrific as Becca. I was thinking particularly as Becca. So it's it's not really a list of things that you're looking for. It's just a feel for it. And by that, and Vincent Cassel had already. I knew that he was going to play Karsh. So at that point, you are thinking about the possible chemistry that these actors could have. And I know that Diane and Vincent had been in the same movie together, but hadn't had any scenes together in that movie, which is interesting. And that's another sort of magical kind of thing, is the idea of chemistry. You really don't know. And even if they might be great together at lunch together, it doesn't mean they're going to be great playing a scene together. So it's really, there's no rule. It really is part of your sensibility as a director, the whole casting process.
You're here. Diane, can you maybe just share what it was like arriving on set day one? What kind of experience that was like?
Terrifying. It's terrifying. It's always terrifying. The first day is always the worst. It was terrifying. Because sometimes you get to work with your idols or your heroes, and you want to do really well, and you don't want to disappoint. You don't want to get fired. So it's nerve-wracking, and you want to. always like impressed on the first day, you know, but you don't sleep. I mean, I didn't sleep the night before. You know, I rehearsed my lines until deep late in the night, and then, you know, and then something great happens. You just ease into it. You know, David is very easy to work with, very sweet, very kind, very demanding, but also very, it's just easy. You know, he lets you do your thing, and then he comes in and adjusts if need be, but he trusts you, and that's a really good feeling for an actor, to feel like, you know, he sees you, he appreciates what you're doing.
But you don't really rehearse.
No, I don't rehearse. I did that once, on the fly, actually, sitting around a table and everybody there, you know, the actors. You can't always afford to have all your lead actors there before you shoot, by the way. So that's actually it's a financial problem, getting all the actors together to do rehearsals. But I found that everything that we had developed and thought about in just reading the script together in rehearsal became irrelevant when everybody was on the real set with the real costumes, the real lighting. The dynamics completely changed. And so everything that we did, aside from the actors sort of getting to know each other personally, became irrelevant. And so I thought, well, I don't need to do that then, because the first time I hear the dialogue spoken is when we're blocking the scene. You know, in the morning, I just have my cameraman with me, the sound recordist and the script person, and my actors, and nobody else. And we're just figuring out, where do you move? You know, it's about the space and the emotional space too amongst the actors. So, are you at the window with your back to her when you say this line, but then you turn to her on this line and you move over to the couch? And so we work out the dynamics then. And that is actually the first time I ever hear my own dialogue that I've written spoken. And I've never, it's fresh, and it hits me in a very striking, close, intimate way. And I find, for me, that works really well. And I've never had a reason to change it, really, in many films.
But that is scary, Diane. I don't.
It's just really unusual, you know, for you. A lot of directors love to rehearse because maybe it makes them feel safer as well. You know, they know what they're talking about. They can direct you in certain ways from the get-go. I have to say, I really appreciated actually this version, and I've kind of I'm trying to impose that on directors that I'm working with in the future, because it's true. Everything you do in rehearsal in a room somewhere upstairs in an attic, sitting at a chair, has nothing to do with what is going to happen on that day, other than you know better what is going to happen in that scene intellectually. But there is something really fresh and very strong about feeling the space, having the time, you know, to explore it at the moment, and then while you're doing that, you film it, and it's there right then and there, you know, and it's not rehashed already.
So you and the cast didn't have secret rehearsals?
No, we did, yeah, no, not rehearsals. We ran our lines because it's very talky, and Vincent was terrified of the dialogue. For many reasons, for accent, for, you know, he had so much dialogue.
See, I love it when the actors do all the work, honestly. I'm extremely lazy, and yeah, Vincent was afraid because it was the most dialogue he's ever had in one movie. He usually plays tough guys who are very terse and they don't speak a lot and they speak quickly and aggressively. And this was a completely different kind of character with a lot of dialogue. And it's normal for actors to run the dialogue together whenever they have a chance, you know, just to get in the groove and feel the rhythms with each other. But and I'm not involved in that, and it's really, I'm sort of either having a nap or eating lunch.
But he was so terrified when we were filming the movie before yours. He was already running your dialogue, by the way.
Oh, yes?
Oh, yes. I was, before I knew I had the
I wondered
job.
why
he
there was that
running.
French film that had a lot of my dialogue in it. Now it makes sense.
I want to go back to Honey. I'm curious, David, what interested you about this this like not so AI avatar, this third character in the film, who's kind of this synthesis of Guy Pearce's character and Vincent Cassel's character. You know, it's made by Maury, consumed by Karsh. But I think you're doing something interesting here with it, because I feel like these days we interact with people online and perhaps we can assume they might be bots. But in this film, the characters, Karsh is interacting with a bot who might actually be operated by someone who's a human.
Yes. And?
I'm curious what interested you about exploring this character, having this AI.
Yeah, I mean, are you talking about Maury or Honey?
Honey.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I conceived of Karsh as needing an AI assistant. After all, he's a high-tech guy. He's an entrepreneur. He's not afraid of tech. And he needs, he's wanting to have an AI assistant, basically, who's taking care of all kinds of, whatever is on the computer. And it's a little like ChatGPT, I guess, in a way now. And he wanted her to look a little bit like his wife, his dead wife. He wanted not to be a sort of uncanny valley, realistic version of her, but he wanted to just feel her presence, because you get the feeling that she, his wife, had that function in his life when she was still alive, that she would help him with his business and organization and everything else. So that's really, why that Honey existed as she did. Maury is the guy who created her for him, because he does his tech stuff. But it's really interesting now, because you read right now about some people who really have, we are so recorded now compared with, in the analog days, that every person who has a phone, and a family of people who have phones, there's so much data on every person in terms of what they look like, what they sound like, what their voice is, what they read, what they access on the internet, that it's not difficult to create a really realistic, sort of uncanny version of somebody who is like ChatGPT but looks like your dead father, for example, and who will speak to you in the tones and the rhythm and the voice of that father, because you have him recorded many times on your phone. So this was sort of a precursor to that. I didn't want it to be that. I wanted her to be somewhat cartoony, in order for there to be distance, to be distance for Karsh. But I can see that people will do this a lot more. And whether it will really do anything for their grief, or will it, I can even imagine it would exacerbate your grief to have an AI of somebody dead. But you would ultimately never have their body, it would be disembodied. And ultimately you might find that very sad and very frustrating, to have this creature that is not really your dead loved one in your life. So I'm sure we're going to find out.
Diane, was playing Honey a kind of relief for you from Becca and Terry? Did that role in some way give you some kind of emotional clarity for going back to these other two humans?
I don't know, emotional clarity, but she was fun to play. I had a lot of fun with her. No, it's just, if anything, it was Terry who was gave me the most freedom of exploration and create a character, more to what I imagine that person would be like. Yeah.
She is a really interesting character.
Terry, yes.
Yeah, she's sort of somewhere between grief-stricken and just titillated by conspiracies. And
yeah.
Was there any research that you did for this?
I mean, I know Terry's. I feel like we all know Terry's.
Certainly, I know Terry's.
I mean, she's I didn't necessarily relate to her, but I think there's enough people like her out in this world for sure.
Well, I want to actually ask you a bit more about conspiracy in this film. I think many of your films explore conspiracies in different ways, but here there's something more intimate and seductive about conspiracies. Do you feel that you're sort of exploring conspiracies in a different way with this film as opposed to in the past?
No, this is a unique version of conspiracy, because I did notice in my life, being the age that I am, which is 82, that a lot of, when people die, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of some of the things that I'll mention, immediately there are questions, were these the right doctors? Did they do the right thing? Did they know what they were doing? Should she have been in another clinic, was this person who was hit by a car, was that really just a random accident or was it planned? I mean, and the reason, conspiracy is a very powerful thing. It empowers you, it makes you think you can see things that other people can't see and that you really know what's going on. And it makes you very special when you come up with a conspiracy theory, especially if no one else has come up with that. It's a form of creativity, actually. And I find that in terms of death, death is meaningless if you happen to be an existentialist atheist like me. Death is really absurd. Theater of the absurd. That's really what it was all about. So it's like Jean-Paul Sartre and all the classic existentialists, but it's that idea. So if your loved one's death is meaningless, I mean, could it really just be accidental? It could be a genetic predisposition. That's really hard to take. We are really, I think humans have evolved to look for meaning and need meaning. And so we will create meaning when there isn't any. And so I think that's where the conspiracy comes from. Guilt, first of all. Should I have noticed that the doctors were doing the wrong thing, for example? Or also, if it really was the Russians, then that's significant, and that gives you meaning, So thank God for the Russians and the Chinese. I mean, otherwise, life would be meaningless.
Yes, this film is very funny. You called it a romantic comedy, and Diane, was the humor apparent to you when you were reading the script, or did that kind of come through more when you were actually on set?
It was there in the script. There were moments on screen that when we were doing it, that got even funnier. And I remember seeing the movie for the first time, and it's all kind of serious in the beginning. And I remember like laughing out loud. I was alone in the theater, thinking, "Oh, am I allowed to laugh at this? This is which was great, and it felt mischievous to laugh. And the more I watch it, the more I think about the movie too, the more moments I find that are really funny. Absurd.
And David, I'd imagine the film was funny to you as you were writing it, but did it wind up even funnier once you were working with actors?
It's just natural for me when I write. I mean, I think all of my films are actually funny and are all at least partially comedies. And it's the human comedy, I mean, it is absurd to be a human. And I think we've also evolved to have senses of humor as a survival mechanism, because it's not easy being a human. You might have noticed this. And so without a sense of humor, I mean, it can be pretty dire at times. Yeah, and I think even in the worst of times, there's humor is an escape and a creative outlet. So, but I don't really think about it. As I say, my characters often surprise me by saying funny things and having funny interactions. And I let them do that because they know what they're doing,
Yeah, you have to let them run free. Well, thank you for revealing something new about our humanity. We're out of time, but thank you so much for the film.
Thank you.
for coming.
Thanks for being here.